Hi, kia ora everyone. My name's Sven from Netsafe. I'm the education advisor for about South Auckland down through to Taupo or so. And today with me is Steve Smith, who's probably doing the lion's share of the conversation today. So maybe it should have been Steve Smith with guest speaker Sven, but here we are. Kia ora, Steve. How are you today?
Kia ora, Svend. Thanks very much. It's an excellent intro, and I'm staggered to find out I'm going to be doing the lion's share of things, but okay, we'll work with that as well. But no, it's great to be a guest of Netsafe. So yeah, I'm Steve. I am the Google for Education Program Manager for New Zealand. So yeah, I look after anything to do with education in New Zealand, pretty much is my role. So it's great to be a guest of Netsafe today, giving a few kind of bits of advice where we can.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm going to open us up with a karakia.
There we go. There's our picture.
There's our lovely faces.
Indeed. So let's go.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia makina ke uta, kia mataratara ke tai, e hiaki ane te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhanga, homie,
tai kie. Nice. Fantastic. Cool, and I'll follow that with kia ora everyone, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, kia papatua nuku tēnā koe, ki te whare tēnā koe, ki te tupuna tēnā koe. I acknowledge and respect ngā iwi Māori as a tangata whenua of Aotearoa, and we are committed to upholding the principles and partnership of the Tree of Waitangi. Awesome, so welcome everyone today. So yeah, the outline that Sven and I put together is kind of this fairly loosely, I guess. This is our big themes of the day, I guess you could say. So I'm going to have a look at some top tips for schools. These are things I've seen from helping people out and from working with schools. So a whole lot of tips. Now, look, as always, they are tips, they are advice, and schools may look at this and say, you know what, we don't want to do that, or that's not for us. And I think that's the power of being able to drive your admin console. So we'll be looking at that. We'll have a look at the some IT user agreements. We'll have a look at logging inside your admin console and what that means. We'll have a look at a really cool tool called the investigation tool. We'll have a look at some sharing settings, some Gmail policies, some security settings around the use of Meet, which is obviously our video conferencing tool. A few little things to think about with users at the end of the year, and also with some of your apps at the end of the year. So that's kind of the outline of today that Sven and I will be taking you through together. I believe we're going to make the slides available at the end as well in some way, shape or form.
And I'll be sprinkling in some Netsafe messages in between where they work really well in there.
Some Netsafe magic, fantastic. That sounds brilliant. So you'll see there are a few links on here. There are some URLs which will take you out to some more information as well. So that's why we'll be able to send this out later on. So don't worry about writing down all the links or taking photos of stuff or whatever. You will be able to get access to this afterwards. So let's wander on through. So our big mantra around safety and security is industry-leading educational technology that provides a safe learning environment for every school, every classroom, and every student. So that's the big thing, is that safe learning environment. How can we make it as safe for our students as possible? So a bit of background on me. I have been doing training for Google for about 7 or 8 years now, looking at our different apps. Prior to that, I was a secondary school teacher, and kind of was the person who asked a lot of questions about IT at school. So that's my background, teaching for around about 20 years, messing around with Google Apps for a very, very long time, back when they used to be called Google Apps for Education, then into G Suite, now into Workspace. So that's my background, I guess, around the Google side of things. So it's that idea of a safe digital learning environment is foundational to Google for Education, so that you can teach and learn knowing your school's data is private and secure. Schools own their own data. It stays within their domain, and we'll have a talk about that as well. But the big thing about Google for Education is that you do own your own data. It does stay inside your domain, and it is nice and safe and secure inside there. So about that idea of keeping our digital learning spaces safer, we have a whole lot of built-in protections in the background, enterprise-grade, scalable and reliable, extreme safety settings that you can use, or you can loosen those off a bit as well. There are lots of ways you can look at tips that help you stay ahead of threats. We have proactive blocking with 24/7 monitoring, and also we have age-appropriate content settings inside your domain. Now, I'll talk a bit about the admin console in your domain. Now, for some of you as educators, or even as admins at school, you may not be the person who makes settings inside your admin console, but the idea of today is that it'll give you some information about what's available, and you can talk to the person who looks after your admin console and say, hey, look, have we got this switched on? Is this set up for us? So that's the idea of a lot of things I'll be talking about today. Priority is always given to privacy, and often people say, hey, look, can you do this for us? And we'll say, no, we can't, because that's your data. We can't actually see your data. We can't go into your admin console and do things. That is entirely yours, and it's locked into only the people you give access to. Also, students' personal information isn't used for ad targeting is one of the big questions around Google for Education. That's one of the difference between Google for Education and, say, your personal Gmail, where you do get those targeted ads. So within Google Workspace for Education, inside our core apps, there is no advertising and there is no information that is sent out to ads. The only information that is shared is if there was a broken link to a web page, for instance. So there's a few little things like that. But what happens is all that information is scrubbed clean. There is nothing personally identifiable that leaves your domain. And we'll talk a little bit about that today as well, how you can make sure it stays that way. So at the top there, that point, you own all your data, you own all the rights over it. We have a whole lot of analytics and insights that can be customized for your needs. There are security options that can be customized. And also there are some settings you can set up by default. So you see down the bottom left there is a screenshot of a setting inside your admin console where you choose whether your users are below 18, above 18, or a mix of the two. And that will set some defaults for security, such as safe search is on, YouTube is off, YouTube safe is on. So there are a whole lot of things within your domain that you can find a lot of information about, and we'll leave you links to that as we go, because I could spend ages talking about that bit. So we kind of look at 4 different sets of people when we're looking at this idea of how do we look at our safety capabilities. We have our education leaders with visibility and control. We have educators, and so there are some digital citizenship and safety courses they can do. With the students, we have a fantastic course called Be Internet Awesome, which is a gamified learning style of how to go through a place called Interland, making really good choices about how to behave online. There is also guardian guides and guardian toolkits that can be shared with your parents and your school as well. So those are kind of our 4 pillars of people we help out. Thinking about Chromebooks and Chromebook security, Chromebooks are not made by us. They are made by vendors like Acer or Samsung or HP or Lenovo. There are lots of people that make Chromebooks. So the operating system is Chrome OS, and Chrome OS is built on security. So you can see down there on the right-hand side a whole lot of information. Chromebooks automatically update. Chromebooks actually have 2 operating systems sitting in them. They have one that you're currently using, and they have one that sits in the background. The one in the background updates, and then they just simply switch. So the updates on a Chromebook may take you 25, 30 seconds. It's just switch from one OS to the other. We have something called verified boot, where the Chromebook actually does a self-check where it starts up, and if it's not looking too good, it'll flick to the other OS, swap them over, and do a little update in the background. We also have sandboxing. So in a Chromebook, web pages open in what's called a sandbox. So it's in its own little space, so it can't affect other things. And also Chromebooks encrypt as they come in and as they go out. So if you're using Workspace in Chromebooks, it's actually encrypted at both ends. So we have a security chip built into our Chromebooks. So a bit of information around security in Chromebooks there. We've talked a little bit about visibility and control over your security. And we'll have a look at some of these things that do this as well. So keeping data safe with data loss prevention. So there is a tool built into your admin console called DLP. And DLP will scan everything that goes on in there and looks for words like the word password, for instance. And if anything comes up with that word in it, it'll actually block it and send an alert to the admin. So it was built originally for businesses to stop things like social security numbers or bank accounts being shared. But you can actually set up DLP to make sure that nothing is being shared that shouldn't do, or to catch words that you want to catch. Multi-layered security that sits inside our data centers. You own and control your own data, and some real-time alerts. And we'll show you how you can get some of those real-time alerts a little bit later on. First big tip of the day is, have you seen the security health checkup? If you go to myaccount.google.com/security checkup, it will actually run a security check on your account. So personal Gmails, your school accounts, you can have a look at that, and it will actually do a checkup. And you see there is a little screenshot of a security checkup. So there are 2 issues with devices. There is 1 compromised password. So this is from where you have password lists that have been compromised. This will actually let you know that one of the passwords you're using has been compromised, and you should change it.
That's actually something that I did last week, actually. Did a scan of all of my passwords.
How did it look?
They all get saved into Chrome. Not too good, actually. I had to go through and change a few. There's some that went to that website once, right? And it was a throwaway email address and a throwaway password, but I've used that password on a different one that's not a throwaway, and I had to go and change it because it's been hacked and distributed on the internet.
Yeah, maybe using November 2021 is not the best password to be using.
No, that's right.
It's telling me I've got two-step verification switched on, and so there's 2 different ways I use two-step verification. One is through an authenticator app on my phone, and another one is through a text message authentication as well. So I've got two-step verification switched on. And if you are a school admin, I would kind of hope that you will be using two-step verification as well, just in case something happens. It tells me I have 12 apps with access to my data. So when I sign up for something and click yes without reading it, they have access to my data. And I can click into that and find out what those are. And if I look at that and go, I don't remember that happening, then I can actually revoke access to that as well. So that's the security health checkup. I won't click into this, but there is a really fantastic link here which actually takes you inside not actually inside one of our data centers, because they are some of the most secure places on earth, with retina scans and all that sort of crazy stuff. But it will take you in and show you what the virtual inside of a data center looks like. You can go to data centers on Street View though. There's a little handy tip, and see if you can find the stormtrooper when you go there. But it tells you what all the bits are and what happens inside the data center. So we do something called sharding our data, where we actually split. So if you have a dock, it gets split up into lots of bits and gets stored in different pieces. So even if someone went into a data center and pulled out a whole lot of drives, your data is still going to be safe because it's backed up multiple times and it's in lots of little bits. So a really interesting little thing about our data centers there. Little note on that, you'll see there are some pictures of windmills. We are actually carbon neutral of all our data centers around the world, and we're looking to become carbon negative very, very soon as well. So a whole lot of information around our data centers there. They are pretty amazing places. I would love to go to one day, but as I said, they're pretty hard to get into. All right, let's have a look at some top tips. So 2-factor authentication for admins was one that I said is a top tip I have seen. Another one is using a generic email for your super admin. So your super admin is the person who can log into your admin console and can make a whole lot of changes. Now, if that admin happens to be a person on your, that will be a person on your staff, obviously, but say it was Steve at school, blah, 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 and I happen to leave and take the keys with me, then I do every now and then get an email from the school saying, help, we can't log into our admin console. So if you used a generic email like Google admin at school, blah, 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 then that email is not going to wander away with someone, or office or principal or whatever. So have a think about using a generic email that other people know how to get to as well. Thinking about password health, we had a little chat before there about password health. How often do passwords need to be reset? And have you actually, within all the different things you use, are you allowing passwords to expire and forcing people to reset their passwords? Because I know you can do that in lots of different things as well. So OAuth I was talking about before, who has rights to use your login, or what apps have you shared stuff with? I did hear a fantastic story about a friend who bought an anti-snoring strap off a certain social media site, and it was about $2, and they got billed for about $135 because they hadn't read what they were ticking, and they actually signed up to the bonus plan where you paid every quarter to be part of a club. So have a read of what you are clicking. and have a look at what also you've shared your login details with. Incognito mode is one of those things you use when you're testing websites. You can switch that off for students, so students can't go incognito. And I think that's a really great idea, and lots of schools are switching it off by default, so they can't go outside of the login and do things they shouldn't be doing. On your Chromebook, on managed Chromebooks, you can choose a trusted Wi-Fi only, so they'll only connect to one of two, maybe your Wi-Fi and your BYD Wi-Fi. And also the switched on safety network is a really great one to add as a trusted Wi-Fi, and don't let them connect to anything else. Great one that some schools do there, they'll use that so students can't hotspot and get around everything that's in there as well. So think about how are people connecting. Disabling USB storage. So again, on a managed Chromebook or on your accounts, you can actually switch off the ability to put a USB stick in, because if we're living in the cloud, you don't need a USB stick. I mean, I've got a great big bag of them that I used to use all the time, but I don't use them at all anymore. So you can actually switch off the ability for someone to plug in a USB, because why do we need that anymore? Storage health. So what is being stored in your domain? Do you know? So with Google Workspace for Education, with our fundamentals, our free version, schools get 100 terabytes of storage data, which is quite a lot for a school. Now, I have worked with a couple of schools who are hitting that because they didn't actually know what was being stored inside their domain. And again, you can have a look inside your admin console and see what's being stored there. So storage health, what's being stored there? Is it time to do a bit of a cleanup? Couple of settings here. You can switch off the ability for a student to start a Meet video call. They can only join them, and that is often a really good safety and security thing, where kids don't join them and they're off in the background using Meet, which is a great way to connect, but maybe you just want to have it set so they can just join them. And also perhaps you want to set up that students can't create shared drives, but they can access them, or limit the sharing settings inside those drives. So a few things to have a look at. And I think, thinking about all these things, now obviously schools do have a current ICT user agreement, because we know they do, but what does it say and does it need updating? Was it written 5 years ago? Has it been updated recently? So the ICT user agreements are one of those things that maybe would encapsulate a bit of those top tips that I just had a chat about there. And I'll pass that over to Svend.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. A lot of your tips really follow a theme, and those are around having processes that kind of reflect the future. And our teachers can, and our students, to be fair, shouldn't really be expected to be fully knowledgeable on how to be cyber safe at the same level as you or I, Steve, or perhaps anyone else at Netsafe or Google, or your IT administrator, and those kinds of things. So you really need to set out in your policies and procedures ways that empower them and facilitate them to use best practice, even though they might not know that they're doing that. And there's a really good reason for that. We've got ransomware that is attacking the public sector now. We had the hospital earlier this year that had ransomware that happened. Earlier this year, I listened to a story about a Canterbury school who had ransomware installed on their servers, and all the pains that they went through. It was right at report writing time, and it was quite the issue for them. And so it's really important that the processes that you're doing help build literacy, even if it's not explicit. And what you're saying earlier about two-factor authentication, that's a really good place to start. And a lot of places, including Google, are moving towards having two-factor authentication on by default. And if we get in there early, our young learners are going to get that best practice as part of the normal way that they do things.
Totally.
So what should your policies and procedures consider? If you're a school doc school, a lot of your policies and procedures will be kind of written for you, and they actually use a lot of Netsafe material in there, so they're in a pretty good spot, but you're still going to want to have a look and see what exactly that means. And probably the most important one is having user agreements for all your users, so your students, for your senior leadership, for your teachers, for anyone else that comes to use your Wi-Fi at any point in time. You want to have some kind of agreement that helps guide their learning and use of the internet in your school. And importantly, privacy should probably be at the forefront of that. And we're going to talk about that more a bit later. Probably want to consider the sharing and copying of data to external sources or private Google accounts. It's very, very easy for a teacher, even myself, to be fair, to have multiple Google accounts that I have logged on, and I just forget to switch from one to the other, and I share it with one account, and I don't know where it's gone, or I do know where it's gone, but it's on my personal account now, and that's a different set of rules that apply to that. And then data retention. How long are you keeping that data for? Now that we are digitizing a lot of the records that we might have kept in paper, and that took up physical space that we got annoyed with and we would clean out. Now that we have almost infinite space, how long should we hold on to that information for? And what processes should we go through about archiving and deleting that data? Things like reports or assessment information, disciplinary records, all those kind of things are things that we want to hang on for a little bit of time in schools, but not for an infinite amount of time. And then lastly, student photos on personal devices is actually quite a big one in New Zealand. A lot of our teachers will take photos of kids doing work or having fun or doing their kind of thing on their phone that's in their pocket. And that's actually a big privacy oversight. And you will want to remove those photos off your personal device as soon as possible, and not have to go through a process that requires you to explain why you have photos of a child that's not yours on your phone at some point in the future.
And some phones, I know my Pixel has the ability to have a work profile and a personal profile. And when I take photos of my personal profile, they don't switch over to work profile as well, because maybe if I'm down at the beach having a lemonade with my friends, then I don't really want that being stored in my work account.
That's right.
Yep. Good things to think about. Good points. Cool. And kind of thinking about it, I talked about this at the beginning about the fact that everything is logged inside your admin console. So each school has their own domain, or if you're in a cluster of schools, you'll have one domain, and everything sits inside that. Now, everything that is done inside that console is logged. Every single change you make is logged. So if we have a look at this, this is a screenshot, a couple of different screenshots of, I have a test domain that I use. It's an education domain as well. So in the middle here is a look at a part of my admin console. On the left-hand side, there is what's called the security health page, and that shows me a whole lot of things. So there is message delivery, there is authentication, there is whether the spam filter, there are settings that have been changed, there is amounts of things that have been shared. Up on the top right, you can see up in the very top here, it's actually looking at how much storage is being used. So on my personal domain, there are 246 gig of information in there. Down in that bottom right, you can see a big spike of spam. And you can also see there are some encryption messages that are being sent to me. So as an administrator, I can actually look at these dashboards and they'll give me this information about my domain. So when I was talking before about, do you know how much data is being stored? You can jump into the highlights up in the top right there, and it will show you exactly what there is. Under the reports, again, you can customize which reports you want to see. You can drag them around and go, you know what, that bit's probably not that useful to me. But maybe having a look at the phishing identifications and the spam filters that have been set off as well. So this is all done in the background automatically, and it's all there for you to use. So data everywhere, as Buzz Lightyear says up the top there. And thinking about that, so I talked about logs. So these are a couple of screenshots of logs, again from my domain, just lists every single thing that is done. Now, even when I, as an admin, go in and change something, it logs that as well. So inside your admin console, you can have a couple of what we call super admins or administrators, and they can go in and look at what's going on as well. And it's really healthy to have a couple of admins, purely because if I happen to leave as the admin and I just don't leave on the best terms, maybe I'll take the keys with me. If I was a horrible person, maybe I would, or if something happened, I had to go quickly, those sorts of things. So think about, who are your admins? If you don't know, ask a question. And it can be anyone in your organization as well. So often it's kind of the IT person who looks after things, but I know there's lots of schools where the IT person is someone who put their hand up and asked a question about app X 2 years ago, and suddenly they became the IT person for the school. So there's lots of information around here, and we are covering a lot today. But do go back over this, and there is a lot of training available for you around this as well. So just recently, the Ministry of Education have signed a new agreement with us to provide funding for what's called Workspace for Education Plus. It's what we call the enterprise level version of Workspace for Education. And within that, now free to all schools, is this amazing thing called the investigation tool. And what the investigation tool is, it uses all those logs I talked about, and it will allow you to go and look for things that have happened. So sometimes you get that, you have to send that email on Monday going, oh, look, if you get this email from such and such, please don't open it, delete it, tell everyone else not to open it. With the investigation tool, what I've done here is I've run a custom search. So it's looking for a Gmail message, it has an attachment, and it has a label as spam. And you'll see down the bottom there is an email from I don't know who it came from. That's fantastic, but you can dig into that and have a look at that. I've just taken that off to the right-hand side there. So that email is showing up as spam with an attachment. Now, using the investigation tool, I can click on that and I can open it up. It's going to show me the message headers. It's going to show me all the data and behind the message headers, who it actually came from. And it's going to allow me as the admin to open that. Now, if I did click on that and said I want to open it, it will ask me to put a reason why I'm opening this email that's not mine. Again, that is logged. So everything that I do as an IT admin, and that comes back to Sven's point there about the IT user agreement. People understand that whatever comes into a school is actually the school's property and can be looked at. So this is the investigation tool, a super, super useful tool that schools can use to diagnose what's happened after it's happened. Whoops, someone accidentally shared this with everyone, find it, pull it back, change the share settings and delete it from everyone.
Steve, if you opened that email and it was an unsafe email, is it opened in a sandbox type thing, or is it the raw type of email?
Yeah, so no, you actually open you don't actually open the email itself. You will read the message. You won't open any of the attachments. You'll just see all that information in the logs here. So you can have a good dig into it. So again, as you're saying before, it's probably not something that a classroom teacher would do, but it may be someone who has responsibility for the IT, or again, a delegated admin can do this as well. So there are lots of different roles, but yeah, no, really good point, really good point. Awesome. So that's the investigation tool, a really powerful thing that is available there. Sven.
Fantastic. And a tool such as that does have some privacy implications, but also a wider organization, any kind of corporate organization, and any kind of school, you kind of want to have a think about what are the privacy implications of having access such as this. And part of the education requirements here in New Zealand is that we probably want to be teaching and have our teachers and our students have an understanding of what their privacy rights are through some kind of digital citizenship curriculum. And that can actually be quite muddied in a school setting, and not really, some people can not quite understand exactly where their rights do and don't end. So we're going to use a context to see if we can explore it a little bit. And it's becoming a very common context now. It's a situation that we probably get quite often at Netsafe, and nearly always offering advice on this. And maybe Steve comes across it every now and then as well. Certainly schools are more often dealing with this, and that is where if you as a teacher or a senior leadership are told that the student has inappropriate material on their device, it could be any number of things, what options do you have? In New Zealand, the Education and Training Act does give teachers and senior leadership some very specific powers that enable them to keep a learning environment safe. because that's something that they're required to do in New Zealand. And we kind of label these the search, reveal, delete, surrender, and retain kind of powers. Technically, search is not a power that you have, but the others are ones that you do. Next slide.
Cool.
So, first question that you should probably ask is it a school device or account? And so that includes a Gmail account or the equivalent for Microsoft, where are you the admin of that account? Do you own the Chromebook? Are they your laptops? Are they your iPads? If the answer is that, you can kind of do anything that you want in terms of searching through that device and looking for the offending material. Whether or not you do is up to your school and your school's policies and procedures around that process, and should be a big part of your user agreements with them, because a lot of people will have the impression that they have privacy rights in this space and will not appreciate the gotcha moment that says, well, actually, this is our device, we can do whatever we want with it. So it's better to be upfront about that in the beginning and say that these are the rules, these are the policies, these are the procedures that we'll go through if these things do happen, and so that everyone is on the same page.
Nice.
When it comes to when it comes to private devices, though, you don't have any rights as a school to search through them.
Cool. I was just going to add, that DLP tool I talked about before, which is built into your admin console, is one of those things that it can help to signpost things that are maybe not being said that should be, maybe are being said that shouldn't be said in an educational context. There's all sorts of words you can set, and that will let you know if people are using this language on their school accounts. Yeah. Cool.
Awesome. All right. So the next question that you want to ask yourself in the context that there is inappropriate material on a device that you want to know, or you need to ask, do you know that that item exists? And you can only really use the powers afforded to you under the Education Act when you firmly believe with certainty that the offending item exists. And you normally need to do some kind of other investigatory process prior to that. Maybe you have network logs, maybe you've had an in-depth conversation with the person involved or other people involved, and so you have a firm understanding that that item exists on a private device. Then you can ask that person to reveal the item to you. In some cases, you probably wouldn't want them to, depending on the type of offending material. You can ask them, and by ask, you can require them to delete that item. If you don't want to do either of those, you can require them to surrender that device to you, where the item is stored on it. And then you can retain that item that they have surrendered securely for a reasonable amount of time. And that normally comes down to some form of involvement with maybe the police or Netsafe or something along those lines.
Cool, that's handy to know, really handy to know.
All right, so the trickiest question, and this is the thorn in the side of a lot of schools these days, is what happens when it's an external online account? The powers that I just described, they don't extend into that space. So if it's a private Gmail account, if it's on a Snapchat account, or if it's on Facebook or on WhatsApp or any of those other kind of things, you don't have any of those powers to ask a student to reveal any of the stuff on there, to reveal the password, the contents, any of those kind of things. So when it comes to online external accounts, you need to get as much information as you can through other sources, say conversations or network logs or those kind of things, and then take it to the next step, which is probably involving Netsafe and/or the police. Sorry, next slide.
Cool. I guess that might be that point where the schools might be filtering out certain websites for devices that are attached to networks to try and help with that, I guess, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And you do have technical solutions that you could have in that place. So maybe you block as much as you can the ability to access those kind of external accounts at school, and the sharing of data from internal Google accounts to external Google accounts, that kind of thing, inside or outside of your domain. Those are all things that are worth investigating or having conversations with your IT provider about.
Cool.
So yeah, if it's an online personal account of some kind, you're best speaking with Netsafe or the police, depending on the severity of the issue. Sometimes you'll speak with both about the best way to resolve that, because your powers as an educator are limited in that space.
Cool.
All right, so just some questions that you should be asking yourself. What are your school's policies on personal accounts? So for your teachers, for your students, if they all have their own Gmail account of some form, but they also have their own personal account of some form, what are the rules around using those in your school and sending and receiving of information from those accounts?
Yeah, good point. And I know with our managed Chromebooks, you can set it so they can only log in with their school account, or only from this domain can log in. So there are some things that schools can do to help that, I guess.
Yep. What process should your teachers follow when investigating harmful digital items? So going back to what I said earlier about having empowering and helping facilitate the expertise for your teachers through your policies and procedures, having a very clear process that they can follow and then either complete or offhand to a senior leadership team to complete is going to make it much easier for you and your school to go through this process. And this is probably one of those situations that's going to happen for a school. It's more of a when, not an if these days. And the frequency that we're seeing these kind of situations is just increasing significantly week by week. And then the last thing that you want to consider as a school, do your user agreements reflect this process? So do your teachers know that this is the process for XYZ? Do your students know that if we go through if someone has indicated that there's harmful content on a device, that things could be searched, their Gmail accounts that are school-owned could be searched, that they're going to go through these kind of processes. Being explicit and upfront about what those processes are kind of really removes that gotcha moment that can happen, but also gets them on board with that process from the get-go.
Cool. No, excellent advice. And I think it's some of those things that I guess you come back to that point made at the beginning. Do your user agreements reflect what the current landscape is of use at your school at the moment?
Yeah.
Cool. So we're going to race through a few settings here that, again, you may or may not have access to, but the idea behind this is to make you aware of what is available to you. So one of the big ones is sharing settings that we talked about before. So if you jump into your admin console, so this is what the admin console looks like for those of you who haven't seen it before. It's a whole lot of settings. There are around 500 individual settings you can choose within your admin console. There are a whole lot that are switched on as default, depending on what age your students are as well. But the one we're looking at here is the drive and docs settings and how the different layers of sharing can be looked at. So whether up the top there, we're looking at sharing options, we're looking at target audiences. What is the default link sharing? You can actually set link sharing off. So it can only be shared with individuals or with named people, not just going, oh, anybody with a link can have a look at this. So you can have your link sharing. Down the bottom is shared drive creation. Who do you want to be able to create shared drives? Do you want anybody to create shared drives? Because you can get in some situations where you might have someone outside of your domain added to a shared drive if your settings aren't correct. Now, some people do like to have shared drives with open to other people. That's entirely, as I said, again, your choice to make, but just be aware of these are where those settings are. So that's the drive and the docs settings inside your admin console. Thinking about Gmail, and we've talked a little bit about mail and stuff today, there are a whole lot of settings inside of Gmail. Now, again, I'm not going to kind of say, do this, do this, do this, but make you aware of what those settings are. So there are a couple of different settings in here. Now, one of them here is looking at authenticating email. So are you actually authenticating the email that comes in? Is that email from, PayPal, actually from PayPal? Is that email from Netsafe, from Netflix, actually from Netflix, or from, such and such telling you from DHL that there is a package ready for you? Is it actually from those people? And a lot of people get in trouble where they'll click on those links and don't even understand that you can actually look at where did the email come from. So that is a setting inside your admin console you can look at. There are some safety, there are some setup, there are spam, phishing, and malware settings as well. So the one you're looking at on the right there is restricting delivery to certain places. There is some content compliance. So I've actually got a search set up there to look for certain bullying words. And if I've made a list of words, and if any of those come up in my email, it will alert me as the admin. There is objectionable content there, so we can configure some filters based on what we think is objectionable content. And again, that will differ depending on your school. The attachment compliance, what you want to do with attachments, whether you want to allow attachments at all. So you can stop attachments entirely. And if you are a cloud-only school or a web-only school, maybe you don't want people sending attachments at all. Some choices to think about. On the right there, on the left there is the attachments. So there are a whole lot of things you can choose. You can switch them on and off as you see fit in your school. Looking at link protections, looking at external images, whether you allow external images to be sent in. The spoofing and authentication settings are all down here. You see these are fairly considerable settings that are in here. There's email allow lists. Are we going to allow a list a certain place to send email in, or are we going to block certain things? We have here the idea of a security sandbox. If something comes in, you can actually open it in what's called a sandbox, which is its own little container, and it won't go any further. So some problems you may have is when you come from Drive onto a non-Chromebook. Obviously, you don't have the same security settings going across, so you may get something coming from Drive. Now, no malware, no phishing, no ransomware can actually execute inside Drive because of our built-in security settings. Also doesn't execute in a Chromebook. If you're going outside to something else, that's where you may get some problems. So there are some settings here that you can look at. There are some spam filters and there are some blocked senders. So if you have someone, an organization that is sending spam, you can add them to your blocked list there. So a whole lot of stuff to look at here. And my top tip here is to talk to your IT provider. So who looks after your IT at school, whether it's someone on site, whether it's an external company, have a talk to them about what the settings are. Ask them what the settings are. Go through them, get them to explain what they are and actually make an informed choice on what works for your school. Because as I said, some things will be very, very locked down for some schools. Other schools may manage it. And you can also do these by what's called an OU. An OU is a group of people. You can see on the left-hand side, I have admin staff, students, teachers, and under 18s. Those are different OUs, and I can actually apply different policies to each of those OUs. So again, it's a feature of the admin console in there. Okay, thinking about Meet. Now, Meet has had a huge amount of work done to it, obviously. Meet began life as Hangouts. Some of you may have used Hangouts before. And it actually is what we use. Yeah, rest in peace. It's now called Meet. So now called Meet, new icons and everything. So we use this internally as, this is what we do all our video calls on. So that's where Meet has come from. It is built on a fairly sturdy platform. If you can think of other video platforms we have at Google, it is a fairly sturdy platform. There has been a lot of work done on Meet, as there has done on all the different video conferencing solutions for schools. So again, within Meet, there are a couple of things I've just kind of starred that you might want to have a think about. On the left-hand side, there is a little box that's popped up in the last few months if you're using Meet with Classroom. There are some defaults within Classroom. So Meet is integrated inside Classroom. If you are using the Meet code inside Classroom, it has some extra layers of security on it. So teachers or co-teachers are always the host of the meeting. Students will be sent to the waiting room until a teacher is present. Video participants outside of your class can ask to be admitted by the co-teacher or the teacher. Now, you can have up to 25 co-hosts on a Meet call. So you can have a couple of people who are running things in the background for you if you want. They will admit people or say, no, sorry, you're not in my class, you're not coming in. If that person asks twice to come in and gets kicked out twice, they cannot ask to come in again. So those are some kind of built-in safety features. Now, on the right-hand side of this, you can actually use dial-in by telephones and dial-out with telephones as well. So someone can dial into your call if they want to. You can switch that on or off. The streaming, so there is streaming available within Meet, so I can live stream this out with Workspace for Education plus 100,000 people. You can switch that on or off. You can choose to have Meet backgrounds. I don't have a background up here. This is my real lounge in the background there. You can choose to have those switched on and off. And I know that if I was an educator, maybe I'd go, I'm just going to use the stock standard ones that are built in. I don't want students uploading their own ones because we know what might happen. Also up the top right, there is recording. So you can either switch recording on or off, let people record their meetings, maybe let teachers record, don't let students record, those sorts of things. Also, you can see there is a star beside video calling. So it says, let users place video and voice calls. Now you can switch it off so they can't place them, but they can join them. Okay, so you can have a look at that. Also down the bottom, there is something called quick access. You can turn quick access on, which just allows people to join if they want. So if you're having a big meeting and you know it's all your staff, switch on quick access. Everyone can jump in. They don't have to go in the waiting room. But you can switch on or off quick access by default, depending on what group of people you're using. And also host management. You can switch it with host management switched on, which gives a whole lot of security features under the umbrella of host management. Whether or not people can share their screen, whether or not people can switch on the video cameras, whether or not people can switch on their mics. So you can actually switch off everyone's mics and switch off the ability for anyone to share their screen. And I know I talked to some educators about this and they said, wouldn't it be great if we could do that in real class, not just in a video call? So there is those abilities there as well. So lots of things to think about. Lots and lots of settings. Again, talk to your IT provider. They are the experts in this and they can give you really good advice on what's appropriate for your location. Okay, let's have a think about the end of year cleanup. So we're coming towards the end of the year that's probably seemed like about 9 years long for most educators. I know it's been, again, we hoped 2021 was going to be a better year, but not so much. And I remember what it was like in the classroom. I was there a couple of years ago, and if I had a hat, it would be off to all the educators who have had to change the way they've done things incredibly quickly. And it's been a tricky year for a lot of people learning some new skills. So there you go, there's my little hats off to educators everywhere. So let's have a little think about the end of year cleanup. Now with users, there are a couple of things to think about. And again, the choice for your school. Either archive a user or delete a user. Okay, those are kind of the two I'm going to look at. So if you archive someone, all their stuff is still there. I know it's a very technical way to talk about it, but all their stuff is still sitting there that are archived. They may be an archived OU, for instance. If they needed to be reactivated, they could be. If they need to have their stuff shared, it can be. Okay, so you can reactivate them. Now, it may be that someone leaves, you archive them, then someone goes, oh, who owns that planning document we've been using for the last 2 years? Oh, such and such owns it. Okay, we'll reactivate them. We'll share that back with everyone else, and off we go. So we can think about that idea. If we're going to archive them, we can switch them back on again. Or we delete. Now, delete means gone. Okay, everything disappears. So the sharing settings may be a bit wonky. You may still see it if you're copied into it or if you're an editor, but the delete will get rid of the people. Now, a good idea here is transfer the files into maybe a shared folder, transfer it to the head of faculty, to the head of year, to the head of syndicate. They can own that folder. Off they go. So the idea of it as a user, if you're leaving a school, make a copy of the stuff you want to take with you, but remember that the school still does own the stuff you made it because of intellectual property. So you'd make a copy of the stuff you need. Everything else will stay there. The school's choice is going to be either delete or archive. Again, have a chat to your IT provider about that, about what's best for your school. Thinking about a digital cleanup, just wanted to have a look at 3 things here around digital cleanups: classroom, drive, and email. Classroom. Now, inside your drive, you'll see there is a folder called Classroom. So when you make your very first classroom, it creates the classroom folder. Inside that classroom folder is a folder for each classroom. Okay. Now, people have made horrible mistakes where they have deleted their classroom folder. Because oh, in the year, I'll delete everything in my classroom. Delete the classroom folder. There we go. Now that will get rid of everything that Classroom has saved. Classrooms themselves can be archived, as you see there, but that information is sitting in your Classroom folder. So that's why it's up in capitals there. Don't delete the Classroom folder. What you can do is you can go inside that folder and delete any subfolders. So you might have had a Classroom from 9 years ago, maybe not 9 years ago, because I think Classrooms are only about 6 years old, 7 years old. So maybe not 9 years, unless you're on the early access. Anyway, I digress. So don't, if you look that far back and you go, you know what, I used to teach level 1 maths. I did teach, probably not going to teach it again. I can maybe delete that folder. Okay. You can do that. So you can clean that up if you want, or you can just leave it sitting inside there. Inside Classroom itself, you can archive a classroom. Now, what that means is it disappears from your list of classrooms that are on your Classroom homepage. It's still there. You can still share stuff from it. You just don't see it. So you can kind of Marie Kondo your Classroom homepage, if you like. In your calendars, each classroom, it makes its own folder. It also makes its own calendar. And that's where all your appointments are shared with your class. So in your calendar, you can actually go down the left-hand side and you'll see there's a whole lot of calendars. I won't share my screen because I haven't Marie Kondoed my classroom in quite some time, and it's a little bit of a mess. But in your calendars, you can just either switch them off so you don't see them, or you can go to the 3 dots or the skinny snowman, what do you want to call it, and delete that calendar. That's all part of Classroom. So do that and get rid of those calendars. It just kind of helps to clean up what you can see. Remember that calendars can be switched on and off individually depending on what you want to see. In Drive, and I taught Marie Kondo. I did go to an amazing workshop called Marie Kondo Your Drive, and it gave me some good tips because my drive was a bit of a mess, I must say. I'd kind of just save stuff. So consistent naming conventions and organizing of folders into subfolders. So I used to teach students, okay, 2021 is your top folder. Underneath your folder is your list of subjects or classes or teachers you have. And then let's start to get a logical folder progression in there. Now, maybe at the end of the year, I'm going to drag all my stuff and put it into my 2021 folder, stuff that maybe I'm not going to look at or I'm going to come back to. So start to organize your drive at the end of the year. Look at stuff that's sitting in there that's like, oh, that's a video I downloaded. And you go, probably don't need that anymore. Get rid of it. So have a bit of a cleanup. The shared with me bit of your drive is not actually a folder. It's just a collection of links of things that have been shared with you. Now, you can right click on them and remove them, but I generally say to people, that folder, just leave it. It's a mess. It's going to be a mess. Deal with it. Deal with it. I know for some people, they're like, no, I really can't deal with it. I have to clean it up.
That's my OCD as well.
It is. Okay. You can drag it around and you can do all sorts of things. So you're the right click and change color of folders as well.
I am, and then you log in through somewhere else, or you share the folder with someone else, and the colors didn't come across, and you go, no, all that work.
Amazing. I always used to love putting an emoji at the beginning of a folder name as well to pop them at the top, because I kind of scan through them quite visual. I go, oh, there, that's the one I want to use. Okay, and the last one, email. Email is one of those things that about once a month I'll go through my email and do a bit of a cleanup. But empty your trash, move any completed email either to a folder, so you can do your folders on the left-hand side. I'm not going to talk about inbox zero because I could never, ever aspire to inbox zero. I think when I left my last school, I had something like 18,000 emails in my inbox. But they were there just in case. Now, what I did go is I went way back and I deleted a whole lot of stuff that I didn't need. If there's anything I wanted to follow up on, I can tag those. So you can tag them. You can move to folders. Have a look at your trash, delete all that, and also go into your spam folder. Have a look what's in there. It maybe you just delete the whole lot, but also, I would go through there because sometimes things get targeted as spam purely because they have a picture on it or they have a name that looks a bit wonky. So sometimes in your spam,
we Netsafe as an organization, a lot of our emails at the start of this year were heading to people's spam mailboxes. So we'd also send them a text message and say, hey, we sent you a message. It might be in your spam folder, just to make sure it got through to them.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's it. Sometimes the spam settings are a little bit too rigorous, and you can obviously uncheck those as well. And going back to what I was saying about the investigation tool, you can have a look at all the spam that's come in and maybe untick some of that stuff and send it on as well. So check your spam, move your completed email into folders. If you're going to archive it, delete stuff you don't need. So that request for a meeting, the quick reminder about something, delete them, clean it all up again, make your email nice and clean, Marie Kondo your drive, and go through your classroom and figure out what you're going to do, delete or archive. Whether your choice is to start fresh every year or to use the same classroom, again, entirely up to you, but figure out what your end of year cleanup is in the digital world.
And it's something that you can do quite easily while you're over holidays and it's a nice sunny day and just sit on a couch and just have a tinker away with it.
Exactly. Think about one time a month, maybe you have a little look. So kind of coming back to all the big theories of the stuff I've said today, safety and security. Safe digital learning environments is foundational to Google for Education. That's why we have a Google for Education version of Workspace, which is very different than a regular Workspace account, so that you can teach and learn knowing your school's data is private and secure. It's inside your domain. It's not outside your domain. It is owned by you. It is managed by you. And those settings we've gone through today are some things you can have a look at to make it even more safe and secure in your domain with your users' best interests at heart. So looking at time, we've kept the time fairly well. I was looking at that.
Impressed.
I thought, are we going to do this in under an hour? So we've done well.
I think we just managed it. Yeah, good work, Steve. That was all of the information that you shared today was right on point, and I think it's especially going into the start of 2022 now, since we're pretty much there already. These are good things for schools to be thinking about, for educators to be thinking about, and going into next year nice and clean, ready to have a nice good start and ready to go. Hopefully we're back at school.
Definitely. And if you have any questions about any of that stuff I brought up, we will make the information available here. There is a couple of links in the chat on as well, which will take you to some of that. And if you want to just do a quick search for Google Workspace for Education security, you'll find a whole lot of certifications we've got, work we've done, and how it all works in the background. There's a lot of information for you, but do talk to your IT services provider. They are the experts around this, and they can help you out with your school.
All right. Well, thank you, Steve, for coming through today and sharing with us all of your expertise. Been a pleasure.
Thanks for inviting me. It was great.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And we'll probably be pairing up again at some point in the future for maybe not similar, but conversation around internet safety again.
Definitely sounds great.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for our listeners, our viewers, for joining us today. And I'm sure we'll have you along again soon.
Brilliant.
Ka kite anō.
Ka kite, folks. Thanks for coming.